Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be dealing with the tip of the spear of addiction. We're going to be looking at some really big concepts, but some things that are super helpful for framing out what it looks like to be in healing recovery. And if you don't know, my name's Devon, and I sit with guys every day just helping them get out of sexual addiction. I'm a Christian. I work with Christian men and some non-Christian men, but that's my passion, is helping men get up and out of their enslavement to sexual addiction. So, hope you enjoy this. We're going to be dealing first with a little bit of theological background. So, what is addiction really about? What is it really about? Well, truly, addiction is about free will. Addiction is about the ability to make your own choices. And I think we would all understand that, even from an outsider view. You can see addiction stops somebody from being able to make their own choices. And that's an intense reality. Like, as someone who's struggled with addiction, and when I talk to other men who struggle with addiction, it's like the frustration we feel over not being able to choose what we're going to do it's immense. It's immense. Now, there's a lot of inner pieces we could talk about there, but I want to come in and look at that topic as a whole, because I believe that addiction is really about the concept of free will. Now, free will, of course, is the ability to make a choice of your own volition, make a choice of your choice. You chose it. You weren't compelled to do it in any way. And addiction breaks that down. So let's talk about free will for a second. Free will is something that is absolutely sewn into our reality. If you think about it from a Christian perspective, if we go back to the very beginning, God creates man, and he creates man and woman, and he gives them free will for the purpose of having an authentic love relationship with him. So free will is required, right? Because you can't love somebody, you can't force yourself to love somebody. Somebody can't force you to love them. And that's what God would have been doing if he had not given us free will. He would have been forcing us into a system. But he wanted free agents that could choose to love him. And then, biblically speaking, our role here on earth is to glorify God. And we glorify God in our bodies, we glorify God in our minds, in our spirits, and in our emotions, and everything. As we render everything to him, we give him glory. So addiction, then, it makes sense why addiction would be a particular strategy of the evil one to compel us out of a godly way, which is an authentic love of God. So how does that work? What is that? Well, addiction is when you choose an answer to a problem in your life enough times or in powerful enough ways that your mind learns that response as a mode of survival. And that mode of survival takes over when you put yourself in whatever those conditions are. It takes over, and it runs a set of actions without your conscious consent. So what am I really saying? I'm saying your brain's powerful, and your brain takes over. Like, say you want to turn left, your brain's like, I want to turn right. And your brain believes that it's absolutely necessary to your survival that you turn right. Your body believes this, and it takes you right instead of left. So that's addiction. Addiction is when your brain takes over, overpowers your higher reasoning functions, and performs actions without your consent. And that is intense. And that brings a lot of theological questions in, which I've dealt with elsewhere and will surely deal with again, I'm sure. But that's not where we're going today. But that brings quite an intense reality, because now we have to be like, okay, there are places I can go where I truly cannot control myself. I truly cannot choose what I'm going to do. So what is addiction recovery? Okay, now addiction recovery, some people might say it's stopping doing a behavior, but that's actually not true, because you can switch addictions as well. Addiction recovery is not just about not doing a particular thing. It's about the freedom to choose what you do, which is way different. It means you're not bound to a response as a necessary survival set. So I would say it this way. Addiction recovery is arresting and acknowledging the survival processes that are driving behaviors that you don't want to have happen. You acknowledge them. Oh, look, I'm on a path towards doing this thing. You arrest it. Nope, we're not doing that. We're going to go a different direction. And then your mind is renewed through the course of doing that by acknowledging it, arresting it, and going a different direction. Now, you may say, Devon, I thought you just said once we're there, we do these things automatically. Well, two comments on that. First, I think many people would be surprised, particularly guys that are struggling with addiction, would be surprised how far they can go while still actually having free will. It's really true. We partner with evil things for a long time before we get to our addiction, most of the time. So I would just encourage us all to take on the burden of having free will and knowing that we can choose something else. Just take it on as much as possible. It's actually also one of those things that helps break us out, like even in a moment of compulsion. It's like we can have this little flare in our mind that goes, wait a second, I can choose something else. And we can do that. We can do it. So it's helpful to, bring on as much of that as possible. The second thing I want to say is that in order to acknowledge a process, we can acknowledge it before it ever gets to a place where it's out of our control. These are long pathways leading to acting out and whatever the behavior is. I mean, we're looking at sexual addiction, but whatever it is, you can notice in an area where you have control over yourself way before that. So I want to encourage you to start tracking back from your behaviors, really what's going on, and see how far back you can get to a point where it's like, okay, I know I was in control of myself there, and I know I wasn't in control of myself way down there. So at what point on this timeline should I have made a better choice? At what point in this path should I have made a better choice? One of the most intriguing things about addiction recovery is that so many men are relatively predictable about where and when and how these things will happen. And they can just make a pattern of how they act out. They can back that sucker up and cut it. So that requires an acknowledgement and awareness, that sort of thing. Let me give you a quick insight into the spectrum that we're talking about here. So we're talking about free will as the largest concept. And then we've got the definition of addiction, which is your brain taking over, overriding, and doing things without your conscious consent. And we've got addiction recovery, which is acknowledging and arresting those patterns so that you can renew your mind. Underneath that is the idea of what the tactics are for, I would say, for the evil one to tie you up, to enslave you to your own body. Your body has the capability to enslave you if you do not discipline it. And of course, I'm sure immediately you can hear Paul ringing in your ear, right? Where he says, I beat my body into submission for the sake of Christ. Yeah, like that is addiction recovery. Telling your body, teaching your body how to go. But there's this inner brain working that I think goes something like this. We have what I call a cycle of consciousness. That cycle of consciousness is the amount of time it takes for us to return to an autonomic process. So think about it this way. If I act out, if there's an addiction involved and I act out, there's a time after that where I have a certain amount of clarity before I again begin the process of acting out. Now, well, we'll get there. That time period is my cycle of consciousness. I have consciousness. I'm free. I'm at least kind of free for a little while. I'm outside of my need for the thing, right? Well, take that and think about the reverse. Satan's goal is to reduce that amount of time as much as possible, to shrink down your ability to have clarity, so that at the end of the day, what he really wants is to shrink that cycle down to a complete loop where you're never actually thinking for yourself, right? This is when we get really animalistic people, okay? When you think about the difference between, well, a good story in Scripture is where the king, oh shoot, is it Nebuchadnezzar? Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. But where the king wanders around becoming like a wild animal for a while. He's like eating grass and stuff. This picture is much like what we experience, where we become more and more animalistic, more and more reactive, more and more out of control, because we're giving up more and more of our free will and living within this survivalist reactionary state. So if you want to think about what would be a really good idea for healing recovery, I'll tell you what it is. Slowing down and intentionally returning to your right mind. Intentionally returning to your right mind. What does that look like? Well, I'll tell you what it does. It breaks up this reactionary cycle, because a lot of times we don't even know this is happening. A lot of times we are just reacting and reacting. We're feeling all the pressures and all that stuff. Maybe we're at work, whatever. We're having these reactive feelings and stuff, and we're not even acknowledging them because we're no good at acknowledging them. We've lived this way for a long time. So because of that, if you take regular intervals to stop and get yourself back in your right mind and be able to acknowledge how you feel and that sort of thing, be able to acknowledge where you're at, you'll start to see how you're slipping down these paths a lot more readily. And you'll be introducing new areas of consciousness and clarity. My friend, you don't have to live based on your impulses. You do not have to live in a reactionary cycle. You can come out of that. And that's what's really exciting to me, is that you can arrest these processes and come back to your right mind. Easy ways to do this. Slow down and breathe. Take some time for prayer. But not prayer like, oh, God, help me, like this. Maybe a little bit of that, but then time to just go, God, I need some peace. Breathe it out. How are you, God? Right? Have phone calls with people that you care about. Break up that reactionary mindset. And I think you'll find that at the end of the day, you don't have as much intensity, biological intensity, bodily intensity, because you use your right mind to calm it down throughout the day. And that is a huge win. So if addiction is your mind's ability to take over and run actions without your consent, then you need to acknowledge and arrest those processes so that you can renew your mind. If you want to do that, slow down. Take breaks. And I don't mean breaks like giant breaks. I mean, take 5 minutes. I mean, 10 minutes is better, I'll admit that. But take 5 minutes and breathe and reprioritize. Think about godly things. If you go to Philippians 4 and you get past kind of the classic peace section, it then goes into a conversation about what you should be thinking about, whatever it's good, whatever is praiseworthy, whatever is right, all this. It says, think on these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Fill your mind with those things. Peace, peace, peace. All right. I hope this was helpful for you in framing that up a little bit. Might give you a little bit of food for thought. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Like and subscribe and all that stuff if you think this message needs to get out a little bit more. And I hope that you are well and pursuing your healing recovery. Reach out to somebody and get a process going for recovery. And if I don't see you, just remember, you're loved. Bye.